Did Thomas Crapper really invent the toilet? How did Soviet era famines give us Tony the Tiger? How did Sigmund Freud's nephew use bananas to start a 36-year civil war? You can learn all about these and hundreds of stories in my new book, Facts That Aren't True. Link in the description. Okay, well, what would be an example of something metaphysical then?
Thought. Memory.
Okay, can you, I'm fine with going into that, but can you give me an example of something else that is metaphysical?
Your consciousness. Everything that makes up you.
Well, yeah, I know. I meant other than like thoughts, consciousness, or whatever.
Memories, thoughts, beliefs.
Other than those things. I mean, like something in the physical world that's non-biological or whatever.
Why is that not sufficient?
Because I'm trying to, well, the thoughts are the thing we're trying to have a discussion about, but I'm trying to understand what you mean by these terms. Because I thought metaphysical just meant non-physical at first. Now I have no idea.
It's incredibly simple. There's a difference in the state of its existence. And I'm just creating a description to distinguish that there's a difference of the characteristics. That's all. It's that simple.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to do with ice, right? Solid water is a physical thing, but and ice is a physical form of water. So is the metaphysical part of this when we call it a solid? Because there's no such thing as solid out in the universe. There's just water in that state.
The metaphysical aspect of the ice is your thought, your perception of that ice.
Okay, sure. Then I think that when I said solid, that's the metaphysical thing. I think I understand. So I don't know where we're at now at this point, but take it whatever direction you want.
Going back to these metaphysical things, sounds like we're okay with that. We got to some form of agreement. So these metaphysical things such as thoughts, memories, beliefs, they are existing in a state of potentiality within the brain or consciousness, however you want to define it. They're not active in the brain and we cannot measure them. Something triggers the memory becomes active in the brain, we can measure it.
Yeah, but I mean, it was there all along. Like to say that it's not there or not measurable. I mean, to call something not measurable until you measure it, I don't really think that's fair. Like this pen has a length. Well, it's not a pen, but whatever. I have no idea what it is until I measure it.
Well, you know what the pen is through the reference of your consciousness. You don't need to actually be physically measuring the pen to know what a pen is.
Yeah, I know. I don't think we need to physically measure thoughts to have an understanding of what thoughts are, because we all have them all the time. Although I do talk to flat earthers. I'm not so sure about them.
I agree. We can understand conceivably what something is without actually measuring it. But what physics demonstrates to us, if something is emergent of anything, we can observe that and measure it.
Sure.
Okay. So you're saying that the thought is emergent of the brainwaves, but we can't measure the thought. We can measure the brainwaves.
Well, we don't know what thoughts are precisely.
I'm not contending with that.
Yeah.
From your example, we don't need to be able to measure something to conceivably understand it. What I'm saying is what the science demonstrates to us. If something is emergent of anything, you observe the emergent property and you can measure it. You can't measure a thought.
Yeah, in the sense that's why I said, well, we don't know what thoughts are. Like, we don't know how to measure. We can detect dark energy, but we can't really measure it because we don't know what it is, right? And with thoughts, we can do the neural mapping. We know where all kinds of we know what sorts of regions get activated. Like the amygdala has this. It's involved in fight or flight and emotions and encoding information, so on and so forth. But we can't measure the actual thoughts in there because we don't really know what they're made of. I don't really disagree. Are we still talking about me being an atheist at this point? I don't know what we're talking about right now.
I'm trying to get somewhere, but we got to have common ground before I progress into more in-depth concepts. So I just want to make sure our fundamental understandings are consistent. Okay. All right. We now recognize we're on the same page that the thought comes first, and then we're able to measure that in the form of brainwaves being active within the brain. Once it stops, that thought goes into consciousness somewhere within the brain, and we're not able to measure it at that point. We're good there, right?
I think so.
I hope so. Okay. All right. So in regards to this idea of conscious experience, we have overwhelming evidence to know that, one, we are conscious beings, and two, we are experiencing within existence. You and I would agree it is illogical to believe in anything without evidence to support it. If there's zero evidence to support an idea, it is illogical to believe in it. And to be an atheist and to say that there is non-existence after the physical existence is to believe in the idea of something that does not exist and there's zero evidence to support it.
What do I believe that doesn't exist?
We clarified earlier, atheists believe that the physical form of existence, when it stops, consciousness stops as well. That individual experiences non-existence. They stop existing.
I don't see how just because I believe that consciousness stops. Okay, let me ask you a different question. Was I conscious before I existed?
That's the second question to this. We got to address the first question. We'll get there. So address the first question first, and we'll jump to that second question. I'll address it.
I think that this does address it. So do you think that I was conscious before I existed?
Yes, and I could support this if you answer my first question.
Okay. Well, your first question.
Why you believe in what does not exist without evidence? You have no evidence to support non-existence.
Because something eventually ceasing to exist is not believing in nothing.
Yes, agreed.
So like at some point, how do I want to say this? This isn't really the case, but it's actually not the case at all. But you know that stars turn hydrogen into helium, right?
Roughly, I know about the makeup of the stars.
Yeah, well, they do fusion, and hydrogen atoms turn into helium atoms. That's basically. Now, the universe is never going to run out of hydrogen atoms, but we can pretend that it will. Eventually, all the hydrogen atoms in the universe get composed into helium atoms. That would mean eventually, at some point in this universe, there's no more hydrogen. It's all been converted into helium. But that's not an example of me believing in nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, well, except you're trying to get me to say that because when I die, I won't be conscious anymore, that means I believe in nothing. Because I believe that something won't continue forever, that doesn't mean that I believe in nothing. And now this is what I was going to say earlier about, like, do you think I was conscious before I was born? Well, I don't want to give that away, so I don't know if you're ready to move on to that or not.
So you're good with this idea of you ceasing to exist, prospectively, non-existence from your point of view?
Everything I'm physically made of will continue to exist, and even the energy that I outputted my entire life will be in this universe in some sort of weird way. It adds to the entropy of the universe, actually. So if you're a couch potato, you actually make the universe last a tiny bit longer. So don't feel too bad about it. But I don't believe, it could be the case. This is what being being agnostic about something is like. It could be the case. I just don't have any reason to believe that after I die, I'll know it somehow. Unless we figure out how to upload our consciousness into the internet or something. But I'm going to need a physical medium to know that I still exist. But if biologically I'm dead, then there's nothing creating that conscious experience in my view anymore.
Okay, so we agree energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It can only be transferred. Change is a constant in the universe. And that what we understand about energy within the physical universe and how physics operates with this energy is that you need to have some form of synonymous energy to manipulate or change that state of energy. So to the same degree we break the radio wave continues. From your view, scientifically, how do you demonstrate the possibility of consciousness rearranging itself?
What do you mean by consciousness rearranging? It's like building a device that can capture my my brainwaves and then turn them into thoughts on a computer screen or something like that?
Let me simplify this.
Because like,
Radio stops functioning.
yeah, like a radio station creates the radio waves, but then your car has a way to capture those waves. So we are not exactly transforming the energy. Well, actually, you are transforming the energy in a way. Are you talking about that, but with consciousness?
We have a physical body that is projecting this energy, and the energy is channeling through the physical body.
Yep.
So the physical body stops functioning. That energy, from what we know about science, it doesn't stop functioning.
Yeah, like my brainwaves, they're out there. The brainwaves I was having yesterday, they're out there somewhere. They don't stop. Yeah.
Okay, so we already established that there's a difference between the brain waves and the thought. The thought comes into the mind, then there's the brain waves. We have to go back to that.
I thought you were just asking me about consciousness.
Yeah. So there's a difference between the brain wave and the thought. So the thought is an aspect of consciousness. The brain wave is the byproduct of the consciousness channeling through the body. So when the physical body of the radio stops functioning, what happens to that state of energy? Thoughts, ideas, beliefs, consciousness. What happens to it? What causes it, from your view, to stop existing as well?
Well, if my body is no longer alive, then there's no activity in the brain to create thoughts.
I agree.
Okay. Well, I don't know what the problem is then. I don't know what you're trying to get me with here.
So the body stops. I'm giving you an empirical example scientifically from your worldview, if you're willing to look at what the science is showing you, that the body stops functioning, and that energy that was channeling through the body continues to exist unless there's another property that interacts with it and causes it to change.
Yeah, I don't think I have any problem with this so far.
Okay. So I've given you an empirical example scientifically to support that consciousness from physics will continue to exist, and that you have overwhelming experience of what existence is. You have no experience of non-existence, and you believe in what does not exist with zero evidence to support it.
Okay, I must have completely missed something, which is on me. What did you say specifically that supports that after I die, my consciousness continues existing?
The evidence of how physics acts within this reality, what's demonstrated to you of what energy is and how it interacts with one another. And that you could have two different states of energy coexisting, but not dependent fully on one another to continue its existence. That one energy could be channeling through another form of energy. You destroy one form of energy, and that energy that's channeling through the physical form continues to function.
Other than consciousness, can you give me an example of that?
Radio waves, Bluetooth.
Okay,
Wi-Fi.
so a radio station is emitting radio waves. Let's say the radio station blows up all of a sudden. Aliens light years away from us will hear all the songs that radio station made up until it got bombed, right? And they'll detect them later on. Is that very close to what you're saying?
Yeah. If you can blow up the source of existence, then sure, I grant you that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is why I said earlier that when I die, my brainwaves keep going out there. But then you said, no, you missed my point, because I'm not talking about brainwaves, I'm talking about consciousness. So
consciousness is the source of the brainwaves.
Consciousness is the source of the brainwaves. So I would say the brain is the source of the brainwaves and the consciousness.
Okay, so let's go back to science. Science demonstrates to us if something is emergent of anything, you're able to observe the emergent property and measure it.
Mm-hmm. But we can't observe and measure thoughts. That's what you're telling us?
Unless you have a way of measuring a thought, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah, because I don't know what thoughts are. But like I was saying a long time ago, I don't think that it's consciousness or thoughts that activate the brain and then you do something, because you can't think of something before you've thought of it. And we've known this from studies. This technology is very new, but there are these brain, like it's very, I don't know if the word diagnostic or whatever is, but we can see the brain waves activate in somebody seconds before they even become consciously aware of whatever they're about to do. Usually it's like the push a button experiments. They can know which button they were going to push before they even became aware that they were going to do it. Because again, the brain state induces that mental state, the thought, the decision to do the thing.
Yeah, there's predictability of subconscious wiring. But again, don't ignore what the science says. The science says to us that if something is emergent of anything, the emergent property, we observe it and we can measure it 100% of the time. That's what the science says.
Maybe. I mean, that's confusing, but I'm not going to try to argue that point, but
just one. Okay, so we're good with the science and what it demonstrates to us. So we apply the science to our theories that we're generating of either consciousness is emergent of physical reality or physical reality is emergent of consciousness. The science says you need to be able to observe and measure that we agree on. We cannot measure a thought. So to claim that the thought is emergent of physical reality does not coincide with the science.
I mean, you can sit, just because we can't measure it doesn't mean that it, how do I want to say this?
I grant we might be able to theoretically one day get to a point of measuring a thought to support your view, but we're not there yet. That's not where the science is pointing us.
Yeah, but what I've been trying to say is everything we know about thoughts is they precede, or they come after those brain states, not before. And if you can give me an example of a brain state or a consciousness existing without a mind, then that would be... Sorry?
I so patiently took us through that, and then we agreed, and now you're going back.
No, I'm not agreeing. You're because I don't agree with you have a massive leap of logic here. Just because we don't know how to measure a thought, because it's called the hard problem of consciousness, doesn't mean that it's not emergent from brains. That doesn't mean that. That's really, I think this is a very sophisticated argument from ignorance.
No. I'm utilizing science to demonstrate my view. You're agreeing with the science, and because the science disagrees with your view, you're getting upset now. So
no, it doesn't.
You can walk through all of this again if you want. But
I totally disagree with your leap of logic at the end. That's the problem.
It's very simple. You agreed that if something is emergent of anything, you can observe and measure that property 100% of the time. I asked for one exception within this reality.
I've never been asked this before. I mean, I'd have to sit down and think if there are counter examples to that. If something's emergent from something else, then that means that it must be observable, measurable 100% of the time. That's your claim?
It is so far 100% of the time measurable within this reality. We've been able to measure everything from stars to quantum particles.
Yeah. So I think a good question would be, what would it mean to measure a thought? Because I think we can observe thoughts, but not measure them. There may be examples of things we can observe, but not measure. I'm not sure if there, I don't know if I could think of an example of that, but how could we measure a thought?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. Nobody knows the answer to that. Nobody has even been able to get to a point of reconciling that or giving a good step forward in that, which is why this is so strange.
Yeah, but don't you think that we observe thoughts? Because I think when we do anything, that's the only thing that we're doing.
Yeah, I agree. Everything is truly an internal experience, that the photons coming through the device are simply going into these receptors that we call eyes, and that information is being processed by the brain and literally projected internally within your mind. Sure. Everything you see externally is an internal image within your mind.
Okay, you know what? I think I have an example. Can you measure beauty?
Beauty is subjective.
So it can't, but it can't be.
You can create a form of measurement based upon the individual's subjective understanding of beauty, that independently, but you can't frame that across from person to person. There's no consistent formula for that.
Sure, but don't you agree that we can't judge something's beauty unless it exists?
It needs to exist at minimum metaphysically, as everything does within an infinite potential state of singularity, which is my point, is that everything truly exists, non-existence does not exist.
So Do you think that we can gauge something's beauty only if it exists? Because that's what I think. Like I can't tell whether or not you're handsome unless you exist.
You have to be able to have some form of perception of something to measure it in a multitude of ways.
Right. I'm not talking about I need to be able to experience the thing to know if it's beautiful or not. It has to also exist, right?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Okay. Well, does that mean that, so trying to tie this to what you were talking about earlier, the beauty of something only comes as a result of it existing. Consciousness only comes about as a result of things like ourselves, which have complex brains, existing. Not the consciousness exists pre the conscious agent, and then also continues existing after whatever I die or whatever.
I'm having a difficulty connecting how beauty is related to supporting consciousness is
because it's an example of something that can't be measured. Like you said, thoughts can't be measured, but it's necessarily tied to something existing in the first place. Beauty cannot exist in something that's not there for us to be able to judge its beauty. And I think that this is the best example I could come up with. I'm trying as hard as I could. And you said the consciousness works that way. We can't measure thoughts. And I'm saying, well, just because we can't measure the thoughts, I don't think we know what they are, and maybe we just don't have a way of doing it yet, or maybe it's completely subjective. That doesn't imply that it can't be emergent of, for example, brains. Beauty is emergent of physical things. I think consciousness is emergent of physical things. But your argument that because it's not measurable means that it can't be the case, I think this beauty example demonstrates that I don't think you even agree with that.
Well, beauty prospectively is an aspect of things as a form of measurements. That doesn't. I'm still struggling with how you're connecting that to support that physical reality comes before consciousness.
I said physical reality comes before well, I think that you can't be conscious unless you have it doesn't necessarily have to be a brain. I think consciousness is an emergent property from sufficiently complex systems. I think a computer at some point could be what we consider to be conscious.